All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our informational briefing of the Joint Committees on Energy and Environmental Protection and Agriculture and Environment. It is Tuesday, January 7th at 9 a.m., and this is our first meeting of the new committee for the session. Not everybody's able to make it because we're all so busy this time of year, but I am Chair Nicole Lowen of the Chair of the Energy and Environmental Protection Committee. And on the House side over here, I have my Vice Chair, Rep. Peruso, our committee member and Majority Leader, Rep. Quinlan, and then I also invited Rep. Hashem who chairs Water and Land Committee to join us as well. We are here to learn more about the siting of the new landfill, the potential environmental impacts of which there has been much discussion. So I'll turn it over to Senator to introduce Senate side and make a few comments, and then we'll move into presentations.
Okay. Aloha mai kākou. Good morning, everyone. And welcome to the City and County of Honolulu, also to the Board of Water Supply, and for coming to our talk story on the proposed landfill. And also mahalo to you in person and also those who are online for taking the time to find out what's going on this issue. So we're going to be talking trash this morning, all right? And while it's not the most pleasant topic, to be discussing on such a beautiful cloudy day in paradise, it's absolutely crucial that we do this because it's something that affects all of us who live here, who not only live here on Oahu, but also statewide. So this info briefing will raise awareness not only about finding a new site for Oahu's landfill, it will also hopefully inspire us to do more recycling, composting, and yes, properly using those blue, gray, and green bins that are sitting out in front of our houses, right? So mahalo. On my left on the AEN committee is Senator Carl Rhodes, and also we have, that guy's name, Kurt Favela, I think this is his name, yeah. Kurt's, and also our new senator, Senator Samantha DeCourt, joining us today.
All right, great. So without further ado, I think we're ready to hear first from City and County of Honolulu, Department of Environmental Services, and we'll follow that with a few questions, and then we'll hear from Board of Water Supply, and then we'll open it up to further questions for both parties. So over to you, Roger.
Yeah, so good morning. Thank you for inviting us this morning to be able to make a presentation on our efforts to site the next landfill for Oahu. So I'm Roger Babcock. I'm Director of Department of Environmental Services. On my right is our Deputy Director, Michael O'Keefe, and our City and County's Managing Director, Michael Formby, is here, along with, of course, Ernie Lau from Board of Water Supply. So we'll start with, from the Department of Environmental Services part of this. So ENV, or Department of Environmental Services, we collect and treat all of the city's wastewater and refuse. So on the refuse side, we have about 400 people in that operation, and on the wastewater side, we have about 800 people. But as citizens, each of us is responsible for creation of more than a ton of rubbish each year. And it's up to ENV to reliably and safely collect all that rubbish, to separate the recyclables, and treat and dispose of the residuals. So these services safeguard and ensure the public health and a clean and healthy environment for everybody. So on the refuse side, our services include collection of the 3-cart system, the gray, green, and blue carts. We have 7 convenience centers, which are free for people to drop off all different types of waste. Those are open 7 days a week. They're only closed 2 days a year, Christmas and New Year's. And we have 3 transfer stations. We have the H-Power Waste to Energy facility, and we have the Waimanalo Gulch landfill for disposal. By the way, the H-Power, the function of that facility is to reduce the volume of municipal solid waste that goes to the landfill by 90%. So the ash constitutes only 10% of the volume of the municipal solid waste. So it's a really critical part of our operations, and with the size of a landfill. So we've been working very hard to identify a new site for the landfill because Waimanalo Gulch landfill needs to close by 2028 by our permit from our special use permit from the Land Use Commission, State Land Use Commission. So to give a little bit more background on the work that we've done in this with respect to finding the new landfill. So Mike is going to go over some of that.
Thank you, Roger. Aloha, Mike O'Keefe, Deputy Director of E&V. So as Roger mentioned, I'm going to go through a very brief recent history of the landfill because it really provides some important context for how we arrived at the decision at the site we named toward the end of the last month. So Roger, yeah, so this slide, what you're looking at here is an informational flyer that we published in anticipation of our announcement. We distributed this broadly. I think everyone in this room, or at least the representatives and the senators, should have received a copy. We issued a press release with it. We published it on our website, honolulu.gov/ENV. But it more broadly describes what I'm going to really succinctly describe right now, which is the history leading up to the site announcement that we made last December. So next slide, please, Roger. Yeah, this slide. So very briefly, 2019, as Roger mentioned, the State Land Use Commission issued a decision and order related to our special use permit to operate Waimanalo Gulch landfill. That decision and order said that the landfill had to close no later than March 2nd, 2028, and shall not receive waste after that date. We also had to name a site by December 31st, 2022. Then in 2020, the state legislature passed Act 73. Act 73 required several things. Most notably, it required no less than a 1/2 mile buffer zone around residences, schools, hospitals, for the construction, modification, or expansion of a landfill. So basically, a landfill cannot be within a 1/2 mile of those entities. It also said that a landfill can't be in a conservation district either. So that is kind of one layer of restrictions with respect to citing a landfill, Act 73. There are also others, and you can see them, as I'm talking, you can see them depicted on the map on the screen here. Landfills, by federal regulations, landfills also cannot be within 5,000 feet of an airport. They can also not be located within a tsunami inundation area. You can see, as I mentioned, you can see all of that on the map here. That was 2020, Act 73. 2021 through 2022, Mayor Blangiardi appointed a landfill advisory committee. So this was an 8-member committee that met 9 times between 2021 and 2022 to learn about the city's solid waste management system and then evaluate and score 6 potential landfill sites. The Landfill Advisory Committee finished meeting in 2022 and they published their final report. The Landfill Advisory Committee did not recommend any of the 6 sites because of their location in the Board of Water Supply's no pass zone. And you can see the no pass zone depicted on the map on the screen here. The no pass zone is everything Mauka of the black dotted line that runs along the coast. So it's the vast majority of real estate on Oahu. Everything Makai is fair game. But also, as you can see, everything Makai is taken off the table by Act 73 or a tsunami inundation zone restriction or something else. So when the Landfill Advisory Committee recommended against any of the 6 sites that we had proposed because they were within the no-pass zone, they suggested that we request an extension to our deadline to name the site, which I mentioned was December 31st, 2022. So that we can further evaluate sites outside of the no-pass zone, which we did. We both further evaluated those sites and we requested and received an extension. And then ultimately we named, and that all culminated in us naming the site that we did last month in Wahiawa. So for a little bit more information on that site, I'm going to turn it back over to Roger.
Okay, so thanks, Mike. So just to clarify, on the diagram shown, the airports are that orange-type color. The conservation districts are the green and the blue. Dark blue is tsunami, and lighter blue is the half-mile buffer. There's also military lands on there, and that was another thing that we were asked. We were asked to do three things by the advisory committee: evaluate sites outside, including military, and sites that could become available if modifications were made to Act 73. Okay, so what we did is we carefully considered all the restrictions and the legal requirements. And so we came up with basically three paths to siting the next landfill. And we've chosen to follow the paths as shown here as path A, as the legal path, as to site the next landfill over the aquifer within the no-pass zone. There are two other pathways that are shown sequentially. In order to do anything other than path A, we would have to move to path B, which is successfully amending Act 73 to reduce the buffer zone and the conservation zone to allow sites outside the no-pass zone. And then if that is unsuccessful, then it would be necessary to extend the operations at the Waimanalo Gulch landfill. So we have chosen path A. And so we've identified a site in central Oahu. It's on agricultural land. It is 3.5 miles northwest of Wahiawa and 1.5 miles past the Dole Plantation on the western side of Kamehameha Highway in what's currently a Dole pineapple field. The total area required for this landfill site is about 150 acres. And 90 acres of that is the actual landfill, and the remaining area is for a little bit of a buffer zone, as well as storage of equipment, place for trucks to get off the road, scale house, et cetera, that's needed for operations and of a landfill. So this site was chosen because it is the best site of the 6 that were evaluated by our landfill advisory committee, as Mike described, in 21 and 22. It's legally acceptable under federal and state laws, including Act 73. It is away from groundwater wells and residences. It's accessible via a major state highway. It has a flat terrain, and we know that we can build and operate a landfill there that will not harm the environment. So the location is shown there relative to the Wahiawa and other things that we can see. This is a photo of the Waimanalo Gulch landfill, very, very recent. So this is where it's at today. And it probably doesn't look like what you imagine a landfill looks like. You might expect piles of trash blowing around and lots of tractors moving on top of that and birds. But that's not what Waimanalo Gulch is. This is what it looks like. It's primarily a receptacle for the ash from H-Power. So it looks like a dirt quarry. I've also brought samples here of ash that comes from H-Power. So this is what it looks like. There's a sample here that we can pass around if you folks would like to look at it. It's basically like dry dirt. And the new landfill will look like this current landfill. And you see that it's not full. There is some space available, and it can easily be operated till the end of our permit. So we understand the community concerns and Senate concerns and Board of Water Supply concerns about protecting our groundwater aquifers. And so I want to discuss the protective measures that we would use at the new landfill. So this diagram here shows a conceptual layout of the landfill, of that location in a little more detail, showing where the landfill itself would be, as well as support structures. And this diagram here shows a schematic cross-section of a landfill, a modern sanitary landfill that meets all the permit requirements from the federal rules that govern landfills in the United States. And that's called the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, or RCRA, from 1974. So there's a lot of things in this diagram, including the daily deposits of ash, which is in yellow. That's what's represented by the yellow cells. And the daily cover of soil, which is the little brown lines. The required monitoring wells in the groundwater to detect any unlikely leak, and most importantly, the liner system. And the leachate collection system, which together prevent the escape of contaminants from the landfill and prevent contamination of underlying groundwater. So landfills require a dual liner system that consists of both a thick plastic geomembrane, and we have some samples of that. There's a sample of part of the liner at Waimanalo Gulch. It was a sample that was taken during installation. It says Waimanalo Gulch, and it has the basically where it came from as part of the installation. So this is a thick plastic membrane, and it also includes a clay liner. So what's required is really a sandwich system, which is shown here. This is a different sample of liner, plastic liner. This is a water layer, a leachate collection geomembrane that goes on top of that, and then below that is a clay liner. And clay liners, they expand when they come in contact with water. So this is what's required for a landfill, according to RCRA. So what happens is that both of these components, the plastic liner and the clay liner, are impermeable to water. So what happens is that the water that infiltrates through a landfill, when it's in operation and it rains, it passes its way, percolates through the materials, the ash and the soil, and when it gets to the bottom, it's called leachate. It encounters the flow layer and the impermeable plastic liner and flows to a low spot depicted there where it says leachate sump. There's actually multiple leachate sumps. And in the leachate sump, there are pipes that connect that to the surface, and there are pumps that are put inside that pipe to continuously pump out the leachate as it comes into the landfill. The leachate is continuously pumped out of the sumps. So this is not a big bathtub full of water. The leachate, the ash is dry when it goes in. So there isn't water. We can't get water out of this, even if you press on it. Water comes from rain. So the other thing is that the permits require, the rules require, that we can have no more than 12 inches of water in the sump at any time. So the pumps are running whenever leachate comes into the system. And and that is in a low place. That doesn't mean there's 1 foot of water across the whole bottom of that place. It's 1 foot of water in the sump. And so it's continuously pumped out. So it isn't a big water retention vessel. I wanted to point out that we are proposing a double liner system. And the required liner is really 2 liners. It's a liner system, but we're proposing to do 2 sets of those. So that's shown in this picture. And so basically, you got these 6 pieces here now. So this is a closer view of what that double liner system would look like. And what's shown is the leachate collection sump for the primary liner is the upper one and sort of the upper middle part of there with the two things that are a leachate sump connected with pumps that pump up to the top. And then there's a second set of liners and a lower collection sump. So if there was a failure in the upper liner, then leachate would be found in the lower leachate collection sump. So that would always be dry unless there was a problem. And if there was a problem, we would know it. And corrective actions, could be taken at that point. And so this is very similar to what's required for a fuel storage tank, an underground storage tank anywhere on the island or in the state. It requires a double wall tank and an interstitial area where leaks can be detected. So this would basically be the same as what's required for a fuel storage tank. I also wanted to point out the picture there on the right shows the liner, and then on the lower right it shows the leachate collection piping. So that piping is going up to the surface, and then it's going down to the right. It's going into the collection sump. So, with this, I also wanted to point out that the existing Waimanalo Gulch landfill, which is what the pictures are on the right, has been in operation for 35 years, and we have never had any leaks of leachate from the landfill. I'd also point out that the rules also require that once a landfill is finished being used and needs to be closed, there are closure requirements and post-closure monitoring. That is depicted in this earlier thing, which shows the closure cap that has to happen. And again, there's a impermeable liner at the top, the same geomembrane liner. And so when the landfill is closed, it's sealed. So new rainfall cannot get into the landfill. And so there should be no leachate. But the leachate system needs to be collection system, and pumps need to be maintained, and everything maintained, including the top, for 30 years, according to the federal law. So that's called post-closure requirements. We, as environmental services, as engineers, we're 100% confident that we can design and operate the next landfill on this selected site. By following all the federal rules and State Department of Health rules, we could obtain all the permits necessary to locate it at this site. And we would be able to protect the underground aquifer from contamination, as well as protect communities and businesses of central Oahu. In summary, this site is eligible to receive an operating permit from the permitting authority, which is the State Department of Health, and also a special use permit from the Land Use Commission. This is also zoned agriculture like the existing Waimanalo Gulch landfill, so it does require a special use permit. Unlike the other pathways shown, there aren't legal restrictions, legal prohibitions for this site. And the ability to be legally permitted by the Department of Health and following the federal rules means that the landfill would be safe and protect the water, the land, the air, and the people. So this is just the beginning, identifying the site. It begins a kind of a long process to actually open a new landfill, construct and open a new landfill, as well as then close the existing landfill. There are lots of permits required. We have to do an environmental impact study and statement, which involves several additional studies that have to be part of that, including public outreach and hearings that have to happen as part of those processes, including getting the permits. We need a solid waste permit. We need an air permit. All those are public processes where reports will be submitted, discussions will be had, and there'll be hearings. But we're committed to continue to do public engagement throughout this process, which is going to take a few years for that to all happen. So at this point, I think we're ready to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Can you just slide some of the stuff over to us once?
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
All right, I guess we'll do some quick questions, and then we'll move on to hear from Board of Water Supply, and then we might come back for more questions. Rep. Quinlan.
Thank you, Chair. For Director Babcock, what's in the leachate? Chemicals?
Yeah, so leachate, so the leachate has passed through the dirt and the ash. What's left over after combustion is metals, a lot of metals. And there's also other chemicals that don't get destroyed during combustion. And so leachate is a waste that needs to be treated. So there are requirements for it to be treated. What we do is we treat it at our wastewater treatment plant. In this case, the nearest one is the Honolulu wastewater treatment plant. So it gets treated there.
Is there PFAS in the leachate?
Yes.
And are you aware that they are now called forever chemicals and have been linked to a number of different types of cancer and reduced fertility?
Yes.
Can you guarantee 100% that the lining will be impermeable forever?
No, we cannot guarantee that.
Quick question for BWS, if I may. So given that we can't guarantee that the lining will be impermeable forever, and given that there are these incredibly dangerous and long-lasting chemicals in the leachate, are we once again rolling the dice with our fresh water supply?
I would say that is correct. There's uncertainty for our future and the timeline. My perspective, the landfills, they're basically, once it's installed, filled up, it's there forever. And will the systems that contain this leachate, which is laced with a lot of different kinds of chemicals or toxins, be kept in the landfill forever? If it can't, then I think the risk is too high to our groundwater resources. And I've made that position clear for a long time now.
Would you say it's fair to say we haven't learned our lesson from Red Hill?
I think we're at the crossroads where Red Hill, and this is where I use the term Red Hill 2, that we were at the crossroads that Red Hill was in its decision-making to place 250 million gallons of fuel storage, underground fuel tanks, single-walled, right over a drinking water aquifer resource. That decision was 80-plus years ago. So we're kind of at that decision point. So the question that I have is, are we going to, 80 years from now or 100 years from now, find out that that wasn't a good decision?
Split.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And with your indulgence, Chair, one more question for Director Babcock.
Okay, one more. Then maybe we should have waited till after both. So I want to hear. Go ahead, Jen.
And I apologize, members of the committee. Given that we have this March 2nd, 2028 shutdown date for Waimanalo Gulch, and given the apparently lengthy processes that you described to stand up, design, construct, and permit a new landfill, is there any way at any site that we can get a new landfill in operation before March 2nd, 2028? And if we cannot, does that mean that regardless of the outcome of your siting proposal, you will be going before the Land Use Commission to extend operations at Waimanalo Gulch?
So thanks for that question, Representative. So, at this point, we do not know how long it's going to take us to site and open the next landfill. We have to get a little bit further down the road before we'll know that. There's also land procurement that has to happen, permitting, EIS. So right now, we don't have a good answer for whether and for how long we would need an extension. If an extension is needed, then we would be submitting for that.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I think that what we should do actually is go ahead and hear from Ernie and take questions at the end. So we'll get to everyone who has questions after, but thank you very much for your presentation. I have a lot of questions as well, but we'd like to hear from Board of Water Supply, and then we'll take all the time we need for questions from everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Lowen and Chair Gabbard and committee members. Ernie Lau, Honolulu Board of Water Supply. I am going to depend on my engineer, Joyce Lynn, behind me to actually advance the slides. So if I'm a little out of sequence here, I have about 30 slides to provide some background information, maybe information to some of the questions that have already been asked by some of the representatives. Next slide, please. So our vision for the Board of Water Supply, we've been around for 95 years, actually created by the territorial legislature at the time. We're part of the city government, and I have the highest respect for the mayor, the managing director, the leadership of the city and county of Honolulu. They have a very difficult job to do here, and I have the greatest respect for them. On this issue of locating a landfill above our freshwater resources, that's where I respectfully have to disagree with that decision. Hawai'i, water for life. That's our vision for the Board of Water Supply. Our mission is to provide safe, dependable, and affordable water now and into the future for our community. So it's not just in the next few years. It's basically forever. As long as people live on this island, that is the mission of the Board of Water Supply, to provide safe and dependable and affordable water service to our community. Next, please. We have a large water system. We serve almost 1 million people every day with clean drinking water. And it takes about, on average, we have to produce about 145 million gallons a day. Our water resources basically come from underground sources, from these volcanic aquifers, and we're blessed by the rainfall that occurs over the Ko'olau and Waianae Mountains to provide this resource to our community. And it takes a lot of infrastructure to provide that service. Next, please. So the city, actually, Roger and E&D did come to the Board of Water Supply about 2 years ago. Next slide. So 2 years ago, we received a letter with the 6 sites that Roger referred to. That was the result of the study they did for the Landfill Advisory Committee, the LAC. Sorry. And in response, next slide, response 2 years ago, around November 16th of 2022, I respectfully disapproved both sites, all 6 sites, because of their location above our freshwater resources. Next slide. Then again, the press conference was held on December 10th to announce the site, this new site, which is also located over our freshwater resources in central Oahu. I also sent another letter basically reaffirming my disapproval that I made in 2022, since this was actually one of the 6 sites originally proposed, and we had already disapproved it 2 years ago. Next, please. Some key points here. And I mentioned before, we're 100% dependent on groundwater, the groundwater aquifer for our source of drinking water. It's very important that there is no water without life. Landfills contain contaminants that can enter groundwater if it leaks out of the landfill. And that leachate actually is pretty contaminated. Landfills once constructed are permanently there. I have, maybe Roger might know if any landfills actually, I can only think of one landfill that was moved in Hawaii. After Iniki on Kauai, they took all the hurricane debris off from Iniki on the island of Kauai, and they put it in Anahola. But Anahola was a temporary location. They had to move it to the permanent landfill in Keakaha. So that took a lot of effort, but pretty much landfills are permanent fixtures once they're there. Preservation and protection of our precious and pure groundwater resources are essential to secure water security for our future, for generations to come. One thing I learned, Representative Quinlan, from the Red Hill experience is that we need to think carefully about decisions that we make that can affect our future. And we need to take a long view what those decisions might leave as a legacy for those future generations. And it's not even the people that are alive in this room right now or that are viewing this meeting virtually. It's the generations that haven't even been born. They're going to depend on these freshwater resources. And right now, this area in central Oahu and going toward the North Shore, it's the freshwater resources that have not been fully developed yet, that may be needed for the communities 100, 200 years from now. We don't know. And also be needed for agriculture, for ensuring food security for our community. Next slide, please. This is just a schematic of a cross-section through our island. You'll see the light blue is actually the zone of fresh water there. And it's basically the porous lava rock is so porous, the seawater seeps under the island. But fresh water originating as rain falling over the Mauka watershed land seeps through the volcanic rock. And because fresh water is lighter in density than seawater, it floats on top of that salt water below. The caprock is a very important feature here, geologic feature, because that's the basis of why Board of Water Supply over 40 years ago decided to create a no-pass area on our island. Because that caprock along the coastal areas helps to protect and keep the freshwater inland and allows to build large capacities of freshwater inland in these underground volcanic aquifers. If it wasn't for the caprock, it would just flow right into the ocean and we wouldn't have the freshwater resources we do today. The caprock is also a layer of protection for our volcanic aquifer below. And the caprock is where we would recommend that landfills be considered if they had to be put in. Next, please. This is just a map from the Commission on Water Resources. They estimate the sustainable yield in different hydrologic units around the island. And you can see the central area, estimated sustainable yield there, about 23 million gallons a day. Then you go down to Wailua, in particular, I want to have you focus on Wailua, that's 17 million gallons a day. These are our freshwater resources of our island. Next, please. So basically landfills, and this is information, we've done a little bit of research, we continue to do more research, that EPA has basically concluded that all landfills eventually leak into the environment. A USGS study done back in 2003, although liners and leachate collection systems minimize leakage, liners can fail and leachate collection systems may not collect all the leachate that escapes from the landfill. The fate and transport of leachate in the environment from both old and new landfills is a potentially serious environmental problem. Landfill liners and cover systems are best designed to contain leachate and control emissions, but even the best designed systems will fail at some point. Remember, these landfills are there forever, so the question is, will these systems last forever to protect our environment, our water resources? Waimanalo Gulch right now, 2 years ago, we got this information from E&V, generates about 3.6 million gallons of leachate annually, or about almost 10,000 gallons a day of leachate. One thing to remember, leachate is correlated, the amount of leachate is correlated directly to the amount of rainfall over the landfill. So Waimanalo, you can all know that Waimanalo on the west side, it's a drier place. I grew up in Waipahu and Ewa, not much rain there, and yet that still generates about 3.6 million gallons of leachate there. And this is from the data. And this new landfill site, actually, when we looked at rainfall data, it seemed to be almost double the amount of rainfall in that Helimano area, Waihawa area. And I know that area has a lot of good rains, about 50 or 60 inches a year, I think, on average. So that will actually equate to greater leachate volumes. Next, please. The question earlier was, what's in the leachate? And this is just some data that we collected from E&V's reports. Waimanalo Gulch leachate from ash. I'm not sure what SMP stands for, but and you can see the different analytes or chemicals. pH is the acidity of the water. Aluminum, arsenic, barium, calcium, cadmium, chromium, chloride levels are pretty high. And we compared that to Board of Water Supply wells in Honouliuli and also our, right here, right across the street at Veritania Pump Station, to what's in our aquifer where, and not in the leachate. So our freshwater resources are providing high-quality water when you compare that with leachate. Next, please. Also, some additional chemicals there that can be, were actually being found in the leachate at Waimanalo Gulch. And so, next slide. I won't go over these in detail. The next slide. And next, please. So this is some training that we took recently on PFAS, and Representative, you're correct. PFAS is like the dioxin of the DDT that we have to deal for the generations to come, because these chemicals develop early in the 30s and 40s, and there's about 14,000 plus different PFAS chemicals right now. One thing they're unique about them is that they're difficult to break down in the environment, so they're there forever. You can see that I've circled in red the leachate from landfills as another potential source for PFAS. I appreciate the challenges of dealing with our Opala, and that's a community-wide challenge. It's not just E&V and the mayor here, but it's all of us together, because we create that Opala that has to be dealt in a way that is sustainable for our island community and doesn't compromise the resources that we depend on to survive, namely our freshwater resources. Next slide. So this is some PFAS information from different studies, different countries, including Europe. The levels of PFAS ranging from different MSWs, municipal solid waste landfills, ash, and below that is the ash monofill at the landfill in the U.S., and C&D is construction and demolition waste. I think Rogers indicated to me that this new proposed landfill would not only take MSW and the municipal solid waste, but also with the closure of PBT would actually start to receive construction and demolition waste too. Next, please. So this is just more about PFAS, and I've highlighted in blue there, EPA, for the first time in a long time, adopted some National Primary Drinking Water Standards, or MCLs, maximum contaminant levels. And these are two different examples of the set that they just recently adopted last year, PFOA and PFOS, and they are at 4 parts per nanogram per liter, or 4 PPT. And you can see in different sources of different landfills, the concentrate of PFAS that was detected in those landfills. Next, please. And this is just another study here. Europe, Australia, and China compared to the U.S. And actually, U.S. stacks up pretty good, but still pretty significant levels. Remember, in drinking water for PFOS and PFOA, we're talking about 4 parts per trillion. I think that amounts to like 1 drop in 60 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Next, please. So the BWS no-path zone, just go briefly through that. The Caprock area, and that's shown in light blue here, about 137 square miles ringing our island. And the no-path zone map, which the Board of Water Supply adopted back in early 1980s, and it's embodied in our administrative rules under section 3-301. Next, please. The proposed landfill, next slide, please. You can see in the middle there, the proposed landfill site is actually in the interior between the Wahiawa and the Waialua area. Next, please. And the USGS and their groundwater atlas of 1999. You have the Schofield high-level water and north central Oahu. The proposed site is right on the boundary between the two. Next slide, please. This map actually is from that atlas. It indicates the numbers are water levels measured above sea level. So there's some unique features of this Schofield or the aquifer system in Waihawa. The actual groundwater, the top of the aquifer, stands about 275, 250 feet above sea level. And you go down to Central Oahu to the Pearl Harbor area, it can drop down to like near Pearl Harbor to about 20 feet above sea level. So underground in the Schofield area, between the north side and the south side, there's some kind of underground dike or buried ridges that help to retain that water. But the arrows indicate what they think is the flow direction of groundwater underground in the aquifer. And you can see the arrows from the Schofield or the Waihua area are heading north toward Waialua, Mokuleia, and Kawailoa. And then on the south side of that Schofield or Waihua high-level water, it flows actually directly into Pearl Harbor. So we think that just based on the water level data, and this is not on groundwater modeling, I want to make it clear, I haven't done any groundwater modeling on this yet, but just looking at the USGS information on water levels, just using the concept that water flows from higher elevation to a lower elevation based on gravity, that there's a natural flow gradient as indicated by the arrows, the blue arrows on this map, that if it were to, leachate were to somehow leak from this landfill, it might head toward the Wailua, Haleiwa area and impact the aquifer down there. So the contaminant plumes would then move potentially to the north. We don't think it'll come back to Waihua at this time because, though, you can see under that word Schofield, the 275, that's 275 feet above sea level. So there's no natural flow uphill. Water flows downhill. So that's our concern, and we have wells there, and there are also private wells in the area of this proposed site or downstream of this site. Next, please. So this is just a definition of the no-pass zone. The pass zone represents the area overlain by thick caprock, unconsolidated and consolidated sediments, corals, and weathered volcanic rock. Basically, not as permeable or porous as the porous lava rock, and it helps to provide a kind of a protective layer, and that's where those are the areas that we are recommended if a landfill had to be built, consider sites in those areas. The no-pass zone, which is above or mauka of that no-pass line, are areas where the freshwater aquifer has very non-existent caprock or just basically soil above the porous volcanic rock. And I know from experience from pineapple, from large-scale cultivation, particularly pineapple and sugar, that the pesticides that were used maybe 800 feet above the aquifer below eventually seep through the soil column above it and reach and is still contaminating the aquifer below because we still continue to treat the water in Central Oahu through activated carbon filters and use about 1 million pounds of granulated activated carbon a year to filter that water. So we know that basically rain helps to drive and carry contaminants from the surface down because rain will seep down, drawn by gravity down, and eventually can seep down into the aquifer over time. Next, please. So this is just section 3-301 of our waste disposal systems, what's in our administrative rules. And the footnote here, back in, and I'll just, for the sake of full disclosure, I'm not hiding anything, back in 1989, the manager at the time executed some kind of agreement with the Department of Health to actually try to delegate some of this responsibility that's still in our administrative rules to the Department of Health. I don't know why he did that. He had his reasons, and I have the greatest respect for that manager, and I worked under that manager too for many years. But for me as a manager right now, I am responsible to administer the rules and regulations of the Board of Water Supply. And right now, section 3-301 is still in our administrative rules and was not repealed after this MOA was signed in 1989. So I am basically implementing section 3-301 because it's still, in my mind, still applies. And the next slide, please. And this talks about the procedures. Basically, 2 years ago, E&V proposed 6 sites, and they all happen to be over the aquifer. I made a decision based on the information that was provided to me and also our research to disapprove because they were all over freshwater resources that is or could be used as sources of drinking water for our community. Once that decision was made, there's a appeal period of about 30 days that petitioner could appeal to my decision. And then after that, if I still continue to disapprove it, then they could appeal to the water board. And that never got to that point. So we issued our disapproval letter in November of 2022, and that letter still stands. Next, please. So again, some repeat, because this is so important, key points. Oahu is 100% dependent on groundwater, the underground aquifer, the volcanic aquifer for our fresh water, for our drinking water. Landfills contain contaminants. We don't know what's put into the landfill. We can't really control that. As the rainwater seeps through that landfill, it'll start to pick up these contaminants, and that'll create something called leachate, which is contaminated rainwater. Landfills, once constructed, will be there permanently. Preservation and protection of our precious, pure groundwater resources are essential to ensure water security for future generations to come. Next, please. And we recently completed a source water protection plan, and this is the guiding principle. Prevention of sources or our water sources from degradation is always preferable to mitigation and cleanup, thus reducing risk to the foundation of our source water protection plan. And that is the foundation of our source water protection plan. Prevention is better than having to deal and react with contamination of our water resources after the fact. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, I think we have a lot of questions, so we're going to go back and forth, Senate, House. Ask members one question, and then we'll go to the next person. And if you have a second question, we'll work our way back around. And we're going to start with the Senate first, since we have
Thank you.
questions from the House.
Start off with Senator Rhodes.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, both city and Board of Water Supply. So I'm looking at the map. If I understand what Board of Water Supply said, that you would only approve of a landfill over the Cap Rock, which is on the Mackay side of the no-pass zone line. Is that correct?
That is correct, or close to that boundary.
Okay.
Waimanalo Gulch actually crosses a little bit into the area where there's no protective cap rock.
Okay.
But the water is very brackish and unusable there. So if an applicant were to, say, propose something along the boundary and provide the hydrogeologic information, that would be something I could.
My question really is, so in that area, the other overlays on the map that the city provided, I mean, I'm just, do you guys have a map where it says, here are the spots where the Board of Water Supply and the city agreed you could actually put a landfill? I mean, it looks like it's not going to be very many places if I'm reading this right. Are there any places where you could do it?
Yeah, so the maps from the handout, yeah, show that pretty clearly. Let me see, you got that one, let me see that one there. So if you exclude the no pass zone areas, then, and you have Act 73 in effect, the federal restrictions for airports, for example, the only sites that are available are some military lands, which, so that's the answer. The residential exclusion, the buffer distance, and the tsunami take out all the rest of the coastal areas.
So that's those white areas around Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, they're gray or white. Yeah, that's the military.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you,
And
Chair.
next, we'll go to Rep. Peruso, who's been patiently waiting.
Oh, thank you so much for your presentation. So I actually have a concern about process to start with. I have so many questions, but my first question is, I heard you say that you're going to be seeking a special permit. Then is it true you won't be seeking or applying for a district boundary amendment? Because, and I asked that question because that process would more, I would say, substantively allow for community, the investigation of community concerns and addressing community concerns, whereas this special permit process would not. So can you speak to that?
So currently, we have a special use permit for Waimanalo Gulch landfill, and the reason that you need the special use permit is because it's agriculture zoned land. The identified site is also on agriculture land, so it would require either going back to the Land Use Commission for a special use permit, or seeking a district boundary amendment, which essentially effectively change the zoning to a acceptable zoning that would allow a landfill without a special use permit. So I guess I'd have to say we haven't made that decision yet about which permitting process we would go through.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Next, Senator DeCourt.
Good morning. My question is Waimanalo Gulch up to full capacity for its closure? Because Waianae time and time again continues to suffer the environmental injustice by hosting the most landfills in history. It's evident by the placement of sewers, power plants, and industrial zones in my district. So my fear is that you folks will come back to my community and ask us for an extension. So my question is there a slight possibility to go further back Mauka in Waimanalo Gulch and keep the landfill there for, say, another 30 years?
So, thank you for that question. The landfill has a permit, to operate now, and that includes a land area and sort of a footprint of space, and that then equates to a volume that it can accept until it reaches its full height. The current capacity at the current fill rates that we have, including the ash and non-burnables that go there, there's a capacity to approximately 2032 for the existing permitted site. However, the permit also specifies that no more material will go there after 2028. So those two things are different. Whether the landfill could be expanded at the back within the existing footprint is something that requires further investigation. But our understanding right now is that there's little, if any, additional area to expand within the permitted area, the permitted footprint. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, I'm going to ask a couple questions. I guess I'll preface it by saying my understanding is that about or more than 400 tons per day of ash from H-Power goes to the landfill. And the leachate production of the current landfill, I think, is something close to 10,000 gallons per day. Does that sound correct?
That sounds correct.
So there's clearly a lot of potential for a lot of impact that just based on those volumes. And I think as Board of Water Supply mentioned, we have to think way into the future. We have a site existing there. I'm sure when Red Hill, for example, was built, people were saying the tanks will never leak. Well, almost 100 years later, you have that problem. And there's going to come a day when if we site a landfill over the aquifer 100 years later, is this plastic liner going to be as infallible as you say? And I think those are the questions that we really need to consider here today. So my question is, I think that the role of the legislature, one of the things we can do is take a look potentially at the buffer zone issue. And I'm wondering if you've done the analysis to look at sites that might be available if we come back to that buffer zone issue and look at reducing that. If you had a suggestion, if you had an idea of what sites would be preferable, if we took that action, or what sites might be on the table, and what kind of buffer zone, if it's a half a mile now, would it go to quarter mile? What would be the recommendation if we're looking at trying to find a better choice in terms of not putting something that could cause so much potential damage to our drinking water supply, in a place where it can cause that damage?
So Chair Lowe and Mike Formby, Managing Director, do you mind if I lead
Oh,
off and then
please.
let Roger Babcock share more details with you? But I'll tell you that there are sites, and Dr. Babcock can talk about those sites with all of you. I had numerous discussions with legislators on both the House and the Senate side, and talking about potentially, and this is years ago, legislators who are still in office, talking about what would be the possibility or the probability of coming to the legislature and seeking an amendment to Act 73. And I'm not expressing a legal opinion, but one of the common concerns that I received from those members was that if we were already identifying which Act 73 site that would be, that it might be a special legislation issue, and that we should not do that. But I will tell you that, and I don't know if that's valid, but that was a concern that was voiced to me. So we
Well, it
know.
would just be a matter of seeing that, that GIS map, and just take that blue layer and just show us, play with it and see what the different options are.
So there definitely are sites that are outside the no-pass zone that violate Act 73 as currently in law. And Roger can talk more about those sites, but we have not, as of today, identified one preferred site.
Understood.
Yeah, so thanks for that question. So yes, we've done that analysis, so that was one of the requests, one of the things we said we would do when we requested the extension to identify the site. So that work has been done, and we have a report that's published, and it's on our it's available on our website. The overall results, though, are on the handout that you have. It's on the back side, and it does identify the sites that become available if the restrictions of Act 73 are relaxed. And so you can see those there. The HC&D quarry, for example, those sites are closer than a half mile to residential. And they're also green, so they're in a conservation district.
So are
Zoning.
these the red stars on the map? Or the
So the green stars.
The green stars.
Yeah, the green stars. The red stars are ones that either military or they are too small, the Prince Golf Course, or they are on the west side of the island. And the mayor has made a commitment that we would not pursue another site on the west side of the island.
Understood. Okay, thank you, Senate.
Okay, I'll start. Going back to the no-pass zone, Ernie, you said here that the proposed waste disposal facility in the no-pass zone would not contaminate groundwater resources used or expected to be used for domestic water supplies. So, based on that, have you identified, I mean, we're looking at 150 acres, right? Have you identified a place that fits that definition? I know it's not your job, but since we're all working at this thing together.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. It's actually, we haven't actually been involved with the landfill siting discussions, although we did present
understand.
A few times to the landfill advisory committee. But we welcome the opportunity maybe to sit with Roger, E&V, and look at sites and give them our initial read on it.
Yeah, it seems like that. Yeah, since we're working so closely together on this, hopefully, that would be very helpful. My second question has to do with the military. I think you had the site that was going to be out at Waipio by the soccer field out there. The military came back and said, well, that's not going to work because we do training or whatever. Did we reach out to our congressional delegation and ask them for help on this? Is there, in fact, military land that's available and that we should maybe, how would I say this? Try to get a little bit more aggressive with our congressional delegation and having them step up to the plate and help us out here?
So Senator Gabbard, Mayor and I reached out to the military shortly after the committee came back and recommended that we do that. And we met with U.S. Indo-PACOM because we wanted to go actually to the highest. So at the time it was Admiral Aguilino. And we met with him and he brought in all services. So in his conference room at Cap Smith, all services were there. And they took this very seriously. And they did look at federal lands. The one that they did not look at our request, was along the Waianae coast. And that was because we made a social justice operational issue that we would not go there. So they did not consider that. But they considered other federal lands, and they have operational restrictions. In other words, they have classified operations, they have top secret operations, training missions that are important to their duty and roles. And so they eventually, after much study and our discussion with the congressional delegation as well, advised us that they could not make those lands available. And some were for many reasons. Some weren't just for operational reasons, but it was also that the lands were in a tsunami zone, or they were in a protected area that was an environmental area with species that are protected. I mean, it was more than just operational mission, but at the end of the day, they were unable to make those available to us.
And you're satisfied that that exploration, it's off the table now? Is that correct?
We are.
Okay.
Wait, House.
Oh, I'm sorry. Back to the House. You're next. Okay.
Question? Go ahead.
So just to clarify, and I guess this is a question for Mr. Lau, my community has concerns, obviously, and should something happen to the landfill site and we should start to see leachate, evidence of leachate in the water, then, and our understanding is that would contaminate the waters of Mokuleia, Waialua, the North Shore, then where would those households need to draw their water from?
Yes, thank you. That's in a situation where now we're reacting to a leak from the landfill of leachate or which the challenge there is the leachate can contain so many different types of chemicals. We'd have to figure out what is the appropriate treatment system for chemicals that eventually might reach our wells. So we have Waialua and Haleiwa wells, which are just, the Department of Health did some groundwater modeling. They identified 2-year and 10-year capture zones. You know, basically, where do you think the freshwater resources would come from the underground aquifer? How in 10 years would a particle travel to the well that's pumping? And that just actually falls a little shy of this location. So, but if you go and take the forever look at the landfill that there is there forever, then a 10-year travel, you should look at 20 years, 30 years. So actually, it looks like this site potentially could impact our Waialua wells, maybe even our Haleiwa wells. If it was impacted, we'd have to see what is in the contaminant plume. Can it even be, at what levels? Can we treat it? What type of technology we'd have to use to treat it, if it's even possible? Or is the other alternative is to give up those wells and actually drill new wells someplace else beyond the reach of any contaminants that may be emanating from the landfill. So those are the challenges. But it comes back to the bottom line, the fact that Board of Water Supply, we're a water utility. We provide water to our community. And we're going to have to figure out how to provide that water. Also, it will be our customers that will have to pay for the cost of that treatment system, or the new wells that will have to be put in elsewhere, because at the end of the day, Board of Water Supply, we're financially self-sufficient, people paying their water bills, and this is the water portion of the bill that comes through the BWS. That is our sole source of revenue to operate our utility. So that cost will be passed on to our ratepayers.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Senator Wa? Senator Fidel.
Thank you. You know, my concern was always that you guys wanted to repeal Act 73, yeah? If you look at your guys' map, Tentham area, you're not gonna build anything on the west side. But the south side, you get 4 or 5 in my area for potential landfill. Now, I didn't support amending Act 73, not because of this, I seen this, is because, again, we're gonna put a burden on somebody else's community in having a landfill. I don't support it in anybody's community. But you guys had a long time, and we know the Act 73. So the potential you guys talking about again, and I understand you guys don't pick this site, regardless of what people think out there, I really believe, when I went to the meetings at the land use and I went to the meetings previously, this right here is an act to pressure the legislators to amend Act 73. And that's the reason why this controversy site that you guys pick, knowing that nobody's gonna support it, I don't care how much liners you put in. Because Waimanalo Gulch, liners went in 20 years later. They made it beautiful now because of the closure and the pressure to close Waimanalo Gulch. So you can show us a nice picture up there, guys, but that's not the picture that was presented back when we was young and that place had birds and trash and everything that you guys don't bury and then put in you guys' beautiful liners. So there's no guarantee here. I'm just gonna make my comment. I'm not gonna support amending it, even more so now, because I'm gonna let my community know majority of them is gonna be in Nova Beach. That is crazy. And I wouldn't do that to anybody here, and I hope none of my legislative colleagues won't do that to me neither. So again, going forward, you guys gotta come up with a better plan. You guys should have came up with a better plan 4 years ago. But there's not. And I understand you guys talk about H-Power and all of that, but that ash right there could be 100% renewable if we had a better waste-to-energy plant. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
All right, House. It's a good lead-in, I guess, to next question for Department of Environmental Services. You know, there's not a lot of good solutions, right? We don't want, no one wants a landfill in their backyard. No one wants it near their residences. We don't want it over an aquifer, but we still make all this trash that has to go somewhere. So what is the Department of Environmental Services doing on a policy level to look at long-term policy solutions for tackling source reduction of waste? And let me just preface that by saying, expecting individual action and individual consumers recycling things they buy, that is not a broad policy solution. That's a drop in the bucket. We need bigger actions and to take the problem seriously, because it's not just about reducing waste or, you know, some feel-good Earth Day slogan. We're talking about our water supply. We're talking about burden costs on taxpayers. We're talking about vast environmental impacts from the amount of waste that we produce, and not a lot of proactive policy to address it. So now we're stuck trying to figure out how to site a landfill that nobody wants, because we have to do something with the trash. So what is the policy of DEM on that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I know Mike would let Mike speak to this as well. He's been involved with refuse for more than 15 years, including all the recycling programs. But let me just say a couple of things before I turn it over to Mike, this Mike. We're required, and we have an integrated solid waste management plan, which really lays out the policy of what we will do and what we're striving for and what all of our various programs are. And I'll let Mike talk to us more about that. And there was a committee that met and came up with a bunch of ideas to move forward, and I'll let him talk about that. But I did want to mention, because I really like show and tell stuff. We do have an ash recycling project that is under contract and currently in the permitting process. We've built the building, we have the contractor, we have the design pretty much done. And we are at Department of Health right now waiting for permits. And this is, this is a product, a renewable product that comes from this ash and makes it into this, which is a sand substitute material, which can be used in asphalt. So that's what we're seeking permits for. This replaces a portion of the sand component in asphalt used in paving. And
I'm curious because that's still gets rained on and erodes over time, and even if it's not going into groundwater supply, it's going into the environment. Now, I don't know how that compares to already existing asphalt, but, and also how much of that 400 tons per day are getting used for that. I mean, those kind of solutions are great, but what I'm saying is we need a broad-scale effort to do source reduction. There's no other realistic way to think about this problem, in my opinion.
Yeah. So let me just answer a couple questions about this, and then I'll let Mike talk about source reduction because we have a source reduction working group. So this material it's been tested. So we didn't. This wasn't made from our own ash. This is made from a facility in Pennsylvania that we're building the same facility like it, and all the studies have been done about toxicity. TCLP, toxicity characteristic, leaching potential, bioaccumulation, bioavailability of when you grind this up and leach it. And so basically it gets bound in there and it becomes unbioavailable and unleachable. This is also true, there's all kinds of stuff, research about that for concrete as well, and using fly ash, and it becomes immobilized permanently. So, but anyway,
And
thanks.
carbon
And it's about
sequestration.
60%.
No,
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah.
I just think sometimes we get distracted by the shiny technology solutions that really just take care of a fraction of this big problem.
Yeah.
So the harder, less exciting stuff is where we still need to put focus and energy.
And you're right. We're doing essentially almost everything that could be done on the processing side. We're at 82% diversion right now of the waste stream. Does not end up, in the landfill. It's
Well,
either recycled.
But are
And
you
with this, we'll be at
counting
90%.
Are you counting diversion does diversion include what gets sent to H-Power?
Yeah, so diversion means if you take the entire waste stream, how much of it ends up in the landfill? And so right now, about 18%, 15 to 18%. With this, it'll be over 90%. So only 10% of the entire waste stream ends up there. But I want to let Mike add some stuff.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Representative Lowen. And the importance of source reduction is not lost on our department. As Director Babcock mentioned, we did our most recent integrated solid waste management plan, 2019. The biggest thing that we heard from plan stakeholders at that point was do more for source reduction. That was the number one thing. And so to that end, we formed a source reduction working group that met in 2023. We tried to meet during COVID. It didn't work out very well, so we postponed a little bit. We started in 2023, finished in 2024, and we published a report. And so it was a group of all different kinds of stakeholders. I think there was about a dozen of us from all industry, including myself, representing government, and came up with a number of things that we're going to act on this year. But it's targeting stuff that's source reduction, so it's further upstream, right, before the waste is even generated, and it's looking at packaging, it's looking at PV panels, the panels that came online, or the first generation of panels that came online right now are going to be pretty quickly cycling out of their useful life expectancy, and so what do we do with that influx of waste? E-waste is another big thing. So all these kind of special waste and just our regular trash. How can we reduce that? So this source reduction. Those are some of the topics that the group covered. It's in a report that we're going to be acting on this year. The report is published on our website, but we're going to be proposing city and state policies. Rules to affect source reduction to help us with our landfill problem. But I would also be remiss if I didn't mention some of the things that we do have on the books that are not pure source reduction, but they have notes of source reduction in them, which is our disposal foodware ordinance regulating single-use foodware, single-use plastics. We're going to be proposing language to strengthen that disposable foodware ordinance, and the effect of the strengthening of that ordinance is going to be less of that single-use stuff in the waste stream. The reason we're going to be proposing to strengthen that is because we also have a food waste composting program coming online later this year, and that's in ordinance and city ordinance. That's going to take the food waste that's currently going into the gray carts. And by the way, about 30% or so of all the stuff that residents throw away in the gray carts is organic material, and a big chunk of that is food waste. So that's going to take that food waste out of the gray cart, put it into the green. That's going to get composted with green waste to create compost.
I don't want to
Yeah.
hijack this too much.
But
We should talk offline
yes.
about that, and I would just say, I hope that, any legislators that want to oppose amending Act 73 so that we have somewhere to put a landfill that's safer should also support the kind of measures that would help us do.
Absolutely.
So
Thank you.
over to the Senate.
So Roger, earlier you mentioned the various next steps, permitting with the Department of Health, et cetera, right? Could you walk us through all the way to the final say on, you've got a proposed site out of Wahiawa, right? So some of my constituents have been, well, what's next? What's next? What's next? So that would be very helpful, I think, if you could walk us through that.
Yeah, so thank you, Senator. There are several permits that need to be obtained, and those take, a long time, an application process, and a couple of them are through Department of Health. But the first thing that we'll be starting, so actually we'll start several things simultaneously, but the first thing we'll be starting is our environmental impact study and statement. And so we already have that in a contract. So we have a contractor available who can start that work. We just sort of need to give.
So that's first, that's what the EIS is coming first?
That would get started first, yes, I believe. Along with, we need to also work with the landowner to procure land. So that would begin very soon as
I've
well.
heard reports on the media that Dole is not real excited about selling that land. Is that true, or what's the latest?
Yeah, so we don't really have much of an update. Our understanding from what Dole has said is that that particular specific location that we identified would affect our operations because they do have operations there right now. But at the same time, they did say that they have other land that they have for sale. So that would indicate, I think, it's a pretty good indication that they're interested in talking with us and working through and trying to find a solution. So we do need a solid waste permit. So a landfill requires a solid waste permit because it's a solid waste receiving facility. It also requires an air permit. That's also a State Department of Health. It requires either the special use permit or perhaps the district boundary amendment to be able to get another operating permit essentially for the location. And then there's also a stormwater permit, which is sort of after a design, is prepared. Then that's actually a city permit. There's building permits from the city as well. So there are. So the other thing that will happen also is design. We'll begin with our design consultant who will take what we have right now.
Was adamant, not going Hawai'i, it's going here. This is the best after the due diligence that you guys put in. This is one of the pathways. But if Board of Water and hearing the concerns, does that change anything? What did I just hear?
It could. I can't say that it does today, but it could. We're very sensitive to the concerns that are talked about. We're very sensitive to the security of our water supply. I mean, we're not insensitive to any of that. But we're looking at a situation where the pathway to siting a landfill becomes increasingly closed and smaller and smaller and smaller if we don't, at every level, try our best to say this is a path that we can take. So right now, the mayor firmly believes that the city and county can site a landfill over the aquifer safely. Whether it's a proposed site, we're just not there yet.
Okay.
But I'm just telling everybody, we're not insensitive to the concerns and the risk, and I don't want anybody to think we are by having chosen the site. It's just this is where we can go now unless we change the law.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I do a follow-up?
Go ahead. And
So if BWS comes through with a parcel, 150-acre parcel on no-pass zone land, you would be open to looking at that. Is that correct?
Yes, we would.
Or not just BWS, but if that were made known to you, you would be open to exploring that possibility, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're getting close to wrapping up, but I was curious, the current landfill,
That's correct.
And that is capacity for that 10,000 gallons a day?
It does, yes.
And then is that treated, I mean, how does that process work? Because there's so much toxin in it. Is it, what's the byproduct and how is that disposed of? Does it
Yeah.
just become part of all the rest of the sludge from sewage waste and stuff? Is it all mixed
So
together?
leachate is liquid, so it goes in
Yeah.
a tanker truck, and it is put into the head of the treatment plant, and so it passes through all the processes at the treatment plant with the rest of the wastewater. And so,
But the wastewater treatment isn't always treating to remove toxins, right? I mean, I'm not sure what standard it's treated to.
so we have a NPDES permit, for that treatment plant, and it has a very, very long list of chemicals as treatment requirements for the effluent limitations, outfall that goes out into the bay. And again, like I said, it meets, it has, goes out the outfall. The recycled water program could be expanded in the future. And so as part of the operating permit for a landfill, there are monitoring wells required around the landfill, both upgrading and downgrading it. And so we are required to monitor those quarterly,
And
requirements.
we don't have any state law that is higher standard than federal law.
Evaluated in detail in terms of site layouts and things like that, but they do meet this, essentially the area, not in a tsunami inundation zone, they're not near an airport and stuff like that, so they meet all the requirements other than Act 73.
Folks putting into improving what we're doing around recycling. Because, and I hear this
Goods and not I don't want to call it waste, but stuff that still has some useful life left in it. So we're going to be starting that early this year. Toward the end of 2024, we applied for a federal grant that would allow us to implement that island-wide at all of our disposal sites. We have Yeah, and just to reiterate the stuff that's already in place, like we have our Blue Cart program that recycles 25,000 tons a year. From H-Power, we pull out just under 25,000 tons of metal every year, just under 25,000 tons of metal every year, 80,000 tons of green waste we recycle. We're also, as I'm talking, I'm thinking,
Feedback loop or incentive for producers of products to better